Our next guest is going to be weighing in on Tesla, Elon Musk's new role in the Trump administration, and much, much more. Joining us right now in an exclusive interview live from the 31st Annual Barron Conference is billionaire investor Ron Barron. Of course, he is Barron Capital's chairman and CEO. And Ron, we've been coming to this conference with you for years. We always look forward to it. This is the 31st annual conference. But this year, I have to say, the news cycle has kind of moved in such a way that we have a lot to talk about. And Elon Musk is probably the most interesting person on the planet outside of Donald Trump at this point. He is somebody everybody is watching from everywhere. You are a longtime investor. You're a longtime friend of his. And I just wonder what you think as you are watching all of this, because Tesla and SpaceX are your two biggest investments in the Barron funds. This has been a bit of a whirlwind.
Those two investments represent about 15% of our assets, about 10% for Tesla, 5% for SpaceX. I watched this with puzzlement, everything that's happening, but I think that one element that is going to be important for Elon is that he will be able to, he understands where there's unusual spending that's much greater than it should be, and how that can be corrected. Pretty easy, actually. You have a lot of cost-plus contracts. So there can be change to the way contracts work for SpaceX, where they take the risk instead of the government. So cost-plus contracts are anathema to operating.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Anathema. What's the word? They're a bad thing. Cost-plus contracts don't work very well for the person who's contracting.
I'm sorry, Ron, I can't hear anything you're saying. I'm going to move a little closer. I know this is going to screw everything up, but you stay where you are. I'm moving closer. Okay.
Oh, I like being closer to you.
So say that again.
Okay, so if you have a cost-plus contract, what that is that you agree to do services for the government, they give you a price, and then you go out there and find a lot of subcontractors to do this work for you. The subcontractors, the longer they take and the more they cost, the better it is for you, because you're getting 12% off the top as pure profit. Just as a prime contractor, you want things to cost more. So for example, the government was sending a program. They want to send people back and forth to the ISS, International Space Station. So they give two contracts, I guess about 10 years ago. One to Boeing for $4.3 billion. The year later to SpaceX for $2.1 billion. And SpaceX has since been back and forth 40 times. Boeing got there once and they couldn't get their guys back.
Right.
So we had to go rescue them. And that contract now has cost $18 billion. It's going to cost $98 billion or $88 billion. It's supposed to cost 11. And therefore, they benefit by something taking longer and costing more. SpaceX, if something goes wrong on a Friday afternoon at 4:30, people don't go home till it's fixed. The other places, 4:30, let's get out of here. And they don't care because it's the government's money, not theirs.
So your point is that
get rid of cost-plus contracts.
The efficiency that he puts in his businesses, you think he's going to put into Washington now,
yes,
too?
and get rid of cost-plus contracts. Yeah. That's number one. Number two is that if you want to go back and forth, you want to go to Mars and you get 1 million people up there, you got to launch regularly in your sites regularly, like a lot of times every day. And if you have to go get permits every time you launch, airplanes don't have to get permits every time they launch, every time they take off. If you have to do that, that really slows you down. You can't do it. So basically, there has to be change in regulations also. So there have to be more reasonable regulations than are in place right now, and you have to have different, this cost-plus contract stuff has to go.
So you've been a longtime Democrat. You've been pretty outspoken about that, but you're also a longtime supporter of Elon Musk's. What do you think of the election results and the government that we're going to be facing?
I think that he had similar views to mine. I don't feel like I'm a Democrat anymore, but he had similar views to mine, and for a long time. But I think that the Democratic Party has been taken over by unions, teachers' unions, UAW. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting is that they had an EV summit at the White House. Everyone's been talking about this a year or two ago, and in that period, they had the leading people for electric cars were invited to the White House to meet with President Biden. And Musk was invited initially and then disinvited. And the person who was praised for leading the way and in the conversion was Mary Barra. I love Mary Barra, but Mary Barra in that quarter did 29 cars, 29 electric cars. We did 300,000. And she was the one who was invited, and she was the one who was praised as the leader in this conversion from gasoline cars to electric cars. So that's because the UAW said, I don't want Elon Musk in the White House. And so it's a lot of these interested parties that say that, no, it doesn't work for me to have someone who's non-union. The reason UAW has been unsuccessful unionizing Tesla's plants is because the people in Tesla's plants are becoming wealthy because they're shareholders in Tesla stock. Same thing for SpaceX. So you can't unionize people if they're doing great where they are. Last year there were 5.8 million people. 5.8 million people applied for jobs at Tesla and SpaceX for 30,000 jobs. 5.8 million people for 30,000 jobs. Tesla might have 150,000 people and SpaceX probably 15,000, but they had 5.8 million. They get the best people. They get the best people who do the best. And how do you take people like that and make them into a union where they're just taking something off the top and it's a job that's not that interesting?
When did you decide that you were no longer really a Democrat? Has that been over the last several years?
A lot of policies they have. I'm an independent. A lot of policies that they have I don't agree with.
Just anti-business policies, anti-growth policies? What are the...
Anti-Israel policies.
Anti-Israel policies, yeah.
So I don't really understand where that came from. The inclusion policies. I think that if someone is really talented and work really hard, they should get the benefit from that. And the policies of Democrats, if someone's not doing well, they want to say, okay, we'll lift you up. I'm fine about giving people opportunity. I'm not fine about taking something from someone who's worked really hard to achieve what they have and taking it from them and giving it to someone else.
Okay, you are an investor. Your top two holdings are Tesla and SpaceX. You also have a holding in X.com. And Elon's got a pretty large role in this new incoming Trump administration. Do you worry at all as an investor that that's going to take more of his time, or do you think his companies will benefit because he's able to be there?
This is an advisory role. So I don't think, right now he's doing a lot of advising. I don't know how active he is in choosing the people who are being placed in these roles. But he was supposed to come. We had a funny bit planned. I was telling you about this before. And we were initially going to do a Saturday Night Live open.
Here at the Barron Investment Conference today.
Yeah. And then I told him about this. He said, well, why don't we do 30 minutes about talking about the future instead? I said, okay, great. And then they called yesterday and said he can't do it. He's in Mar-a-Lago. Can't arrange it. Can't leave. Can't come in. Can't get the G.
So he's actively involved. We've heard the reports about this, but you've heard it too.
The people in SpaceX told me that he doesn't miss any meetings. Okay. So he comes to these meetings, same thing with Tesla. I don't understand how he's able to do all this.
Yeah, there doesn't seem like there's enough hours in the day.
No, it's amazing what he does. And he lives on airplanes and flies around all over. I don't see how anyone can compete with him the way he works. But I think that, so he says, well, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. He's 53, I guess.
I'm sorry, he says what?
He says, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. He's 53. I'm 81. So he's 53 and he flies all over. And so he, it takes a toll on his body. But boy, he is sharp. He can talk about everything, anything, like William the Great, the Conqueror, just everything. He's so well read. And I guess he must have a photographic memory. He remembers everything.
We've seen his stocks jump significantly. I think Tesla shares were up about 30% in the first week or so after the election. And Elon himself has said recently, just watching the stock fluctuate, that he sees things a little more like Warren Buffett. When people are looking at a house and yelling out prices all day, it doesn't make a lot of sense. To him, it's still the same house. Does the huge jump in the stock price make sense to you as an investor? And what are you doing just in terms of buying and selling?
Well, stock price is the same as it was 3 years ago. So it was higher 3 years ago than it is today, actually. Yeah. And the way I think about Tesla is I think that our cost, I met him in 2010. It took 4 years before I became convinced to invest in him. He said, what took you so long? And we invested $400 million between 2014 and 2016.
Just in Tesla, or is that
just
everything?
In Tesla.
Just in Tesla.
$400 million in Tesla, 14 to 16. And we made about $6 billion in profit so far. and we sold a quarter of our stock in 2020.
Yeah.
3 years ago, 2021, after it had gone up 20 times. And
there were people who questioned you at the time why you were selling 25%. I think you told us that it was because it had gotten to be such a big part of the portfolio.
Yeah, it was too big. It was 20 and up 20 times. And the idea that I wanted to have is I didn't want people to think that I had died, and that's why they still own the stock. So I wanted to make, and by the way, so one of my good friends is Will Danoff, and he is at Fidelity. And I was telling him, I just read something about the people who've done the best in your funds are the people who are dead. Is that true? He says, well, I never heard that before, but I'll look it up. So he goes and looks it up. He calls me back the next day. He said, well, you challenge me all the time. 3% of my shareholders are dead, and they actually have held it on an average for 18 years, and they're my best performing shareholders.
Well, that goes to your point of you buy things and you hold for very long periods of time.
As long as they're doing well.
Yeah.
And when they're not doing well, or when the fundamentals change, or it becomes too big a percentage of the portfolio,
well,
we reduce.
You went through a couple of years where you could have classified Tesla as such. You had a couple of rough years, and talk to us in the middle of some of those years over the last 3 years.
Well, 2014 to 2016, when we invested that $400 million, the stock was acting like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And for the past 3 years, the stock has also been a yo-yo performing stock, because what they're doing is that they're reinvesting in their business. They're penalizing current profitability to become a much bigger business in the future. And whenever that happens, so the reason we've outperformed, so I was telling you before, 97% of our assets do better than the indexes, 94, 95%, top 20%.
You have $45 billion in assets under management right now.
Right.
And that, in terms of what the profits you've paid back to investors since 1992, when the partnership first began, that's $49 billion?
We had $100 million in under management in 1992, $10 million in 1982. Now it's $45 billion, but we've made $49 billion in profits. So we paid people over the past 30 years $4 billion more than we made them, more than they've given us, but we now have $45 billion. I'm hoping that in the next 10 years we can quadruple our assets.
Your faith in Elon Musk sounds like it's stronger than ever. Is this a stock that you would sell, just from the perspective of if it goes up so much, it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of your portfolio?
So I think that it's right now worth $1 trillion. And what's Bitcoin, $1.7 trillion? So would I rather have 2 Teslas or 1 Bitcoin? So basically, the way I think about it is that Tesla, I think, is going to be worth $3 or $4 trillion, $5 trillion in 10 years, based upon the business plan that I'm aware of. And then Elon believes that longer term, it's going to be worth $30 trillion. It's now being worth $1 trillion.
Do you believe that?
Well, the people from Goldman Sachs were doing something for me. One of the executives in California who's being groomed, I think, to be the next CEO of Goldman Sachs, he and 3 other people from Goldman came to visit me this past summer at my house in East Hampton. And they were telling me, his name is Dan Dees, they were telling me that Elon, Goldman then was struggling to get their business value from 150 billion in the market to 180 billion. So Elon said, why don't you come to my plant in Palo Alto where I have Optimus Robots? I want you to see what that is. So he says, so we go there, I take the board and we go out to, he says, Ron, it's dystopian, it's amazing, you got to go see this. So I went to see it. And there's robots walking all over. And the idea that he has is that, so here we have, there wouldn't be any EVs without him, there wouldn't be any autonomous driving without him, there wouldn't be any rockets you use over and over without him, you wouldn't have any Starlink without him. So the idea is that this Optimus Robots, he thinks is going to be his biggest business ever. And he thinks that, he says everyone's going to have robots. And my big question was, when I was watching these things walking around and how intelligent they're becoming, super intelligent, I said, well, can they procreate? That's the question I have. And how is that going to happen?
But is this your way of saying, no, you're not going to sell
no way am I
shares
selling.
of any of your companies or your investments in?
No. Just to, if they get too big, then I'll have to trim a little bit, but no. Yeah. I have no intention. You
brought up Bitcoin, and before we came on, you were talking about how you wanted to congratulate Joe on what he's bought with Bitcoin. If you want to do it, this may be the opportunity. I promised I would remind you.
So my idea is...
Look there if you're going to talk.
So my idea about Bitcoin is that you've done the same thing with Bitcoin that I do with my businesses. So you know more about Bitcoin than anyone else. So you can't make a decision based on someone else is telling you and do the best. You have to do the work yourself. You've done the work yourself on Bitcoin. Congratulations on doing it. Congratulations on whatever it becomes. It wasn't for me, but good going. And for me, the work that you do on Bitcoin is the same kind of work that we do on SpaceX or Tesla, or all the other businesses in which we invest, that we know more about it than anyone else. You can't rely on someone else to tell you what to do. You have to be able to make a decision on what you know, not on what someone's telling you.
That's right, and I don't think it takes that long, Ron.
Joe, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Do sign language, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
I'm sorry, we'll get back to you. Maybe we can fix the audio in the
yeah.
meantime. I'll talk to him, but we're not hearing anything coming through on audio at this point. Ron, let me ask you a little bit about overall your perspective on the economy and the markets at this point, because the markets have taken off post-election. There is this feeling that an administration that's going to be much more business-friendly and is going to remove regulation will get things off and running. Is that your opinion too, and how much of that has already been baked into what we see here?
I was on your program 10 or 11 years ago, and people passed around this video to my office, and the Dow Jones was in 14,000, and I said that.
Go ahead.
Okay, and you asked me the same kind of question, and I said that I thought that the market in 10 years would be 30,000, not 14,000. Everyone was negative at the time, and when you know, it got to 30,000 a year ago or 2 years ago. And that was right. And so what I think about is that the stock market reflects the economy. It does a little bit better because businesses are operating less capital, more capital efficient than they had been before. So the big picture, so we don't predict wars, I don't predict Bitcoin, don't predict currency prices, don't predict who's going to become president. The only thing I predict is inflation. And inflation is something, this is not a 4-year phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that's my entire life. So I'm 81 years old. This is my entire life. And everything doubles in price about every 14 or 15 years. That means 4 or 5% inflation. So 4 or 5% inflation. So investing in businesses is the way you offset the risk that you have in your investments in inflation. You got to invest in growth companies so they'll be able to grow and your assets will become worth more. And that's what I think.
And that's what you've always talked about, but I guess the question becomes, it's not an even march. Have we seen a lot of the growth of stocks already pulled in because of this? Or do you think that this unleashes so much that this is going to be a period of huge growth from here?
I think that inflation is going to be 4 or 5% a year. That means everything is going to be double. Everything you want to buy will cost twice as much in 10 years as it does today, 15 years as it does today.
But,
and you can invest in stocks which on average will about double in price about every 10 years. So that means that in 10 years from now, the Dow Jones, which is what right now, 42, 43,000, so that means it's going to be 80,000 in 10 or 12 years.
But Nelson Peltz said earlier this week to CNBC that, trees don't grow to the sky, that he has seen, I think he's pretty optimistic about what he sees happening from a business perspective with this new administration, but he also says trees don't grow to the sky. So is there the potential for some stops and starts or maybe some pullbacks just based on how much we've seen things run?
There's always been, I can't predict the market. I don't even try. So everyone comes in and says, what's the market going to do? I have no idea. And I don't even try. We interview analysts, and we don't even talk about stocks. We interview analysts. I want to know who they are.
Yeah.
I don't care about what they know. I want really smart people, and I want them to be able to be trained the way we look at things, first principles research, to just look at things, rip it apart in your head, put it back together, see if it makes sense. If you like the business and think the prospects are good, and you trust the people, then invest in it. Someone we were doing business with yesterday was talking to one of the people in charge of our distribution, and she was being told by this investor, well, we didn't have an agreement in writing, it was verbal. And Jay Pritzker used to say to me, a handshake, if you can't trust the person you're doing business with, then you can't do business with them. Right. It doesn't matter what they say. So this guy says, we didn't have a contract in writing. Seriously?
Right.
So
Ron, that's one of the things I've always loved about you, your consistency, your long-term views on how you see these things and how you buy stocks and you stick with them and you hold them. And this is part of the legacy you've built. The 31st annual Building Legacy is the theme this time at the Barron Annual Conference. I want to wish you all the best. We're going to be watching throughout the day, and we really appreciate your time here.
So one thing about Build Legacy, so Ford is a company that's built to last, they say. Built to last. They never innovated. They never had electric cars. They never connected cars. They sold what they built. They didn't sell, they weren't building something. Building legacy means that what you're building today is going to be able to provide the same kind of returns or better in the future than it is today. We're building legacy. It's not what we built.
Well, we appreciate you having us here today. It's really great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.